No problem. The more the merrier. Wow, we got a mic here.
We're good. All right, welcome. This is our last day, last lecture for the fall semester, so thank you. I know everyone was a little slow getting in today, but that's okay. I think we have a good group, and hopefully a few more people trickle in. A couple of things. For some reason, the same issue happened with Blackboard again, where you got the announcement that it was too early. But the test does become available tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it will be available through Sunday midnight. So all that information will become available to you tomorrow morning. You have plenty of time to do it. Just make sure you do it in one sitting, and that's it. In terms of class next week, I will be here, but there isn't a speaker, so I'm just here in case you have any questions or if there was any confusion with grades, so we can sit down, or if you have questions about any of the speakers, anything like that, I'll be here from 4 to 5 p.m. to answer those, and otherwise, for many of you, I probably won't see you. So it's been such a great semester, and thank you so much for your participation. This has become a panel discussion that has become a tradition here as part of Faces and Places in Fashion, as long as I've been here, and it's been 8 years now, which is kind of crazy. But every semester for our last presentation, we invite the Fashion Service Network to provide a panel discussion about your personal brand and how you can use that personal brand for your career in the fashion industry. So a little bit about the Fashion Service Network, and then we're going to jump right in. They started in 2002 as a response to the fashion industry's need for innovation and multidisciplinary approaches and conversation. The Fashion Service Network is a group of select, experienced, and seasoned professionals delivering solutions and opportunities to the industry. They run the gamut from finance, factoring, branding, marketing, distribution, transportation, legal, you name it, they are part of the Fashion Service Network. They work together to assist fashion companies of all levels, and they meet once a month to be able to discuss the issues in the fashion industry, to compare notes in many ways, to share information, share ideas. In fact, going back many years, the Fashion Service Network was also very helpful in my thesis when I'm getting my master's degree here at FIT. So I want to introduce our panel, and then I'll let them talk about themselves, I'm sure. So we have Andrew Jassin here.
Hello, everybody. By the way, 20% of your grade is your participation today.
Joshua Kapelman from Hildun. Trudy Larson. Tom Nastos. Jaqui Lividini, and Michael Stanley. And I'm going to join them as well, but Michael Stanley will be our moderator today, and will be the one grilling you with lots of questions, so be prepared.
Great. Do we need a microphone?
Yes, for the video.
Josh, whatever you say. And thank you for inviting us. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
We always try to have a lot of fun and talk to the students, and hopefully we learn from you, and perhaps you can learn a little bit from us. I want to start out by just giving you a little more background on our panel. And to my right is Jaqui Lividini, and Jaqui runs a fantastic marketing firm, and which we use as well. And I'd like to have Jaqui tell us what you do and who you do it for.
Oh, okay. We are a brand strategy firm because everything begins...
We need to use the mic just so that, yep.
Sorry. We're a brand strategy firm because everything begins and ends with strategy. So in fashion, there tends to be an urgency to get things done, and it's not always well thought out, and sometimes it creates magic, and more often it doesn't. So clients come to us to help them navigate their marketing, their messaging, their brand discovery, and how they're going to present themselves to the world. And we work with clients like Neiman Marcus, HSN, QVC, MCM, a lot of initials, Vera Bradley, Ellen DeGeneres. We're blessed with amazing clients, and some of them, like Ellen, we've taken from the inception of her brand Ed all the way to today, and she's about a $300 million brand in, I think, about 4 years. So that's what we do.
And Jaqui happens to be a member of the FIT trustee board.
Yes, I am very honored to do that. And I went to FIT too, so full circle.
As to the gentleman to your right, which is Tom Nastos, and Tom is also an alum, and he's on the foundation board.
So that's correct. I'm also an alum, so here we are, right? And I'm on the foundation board. As Michael mentioned, my name is Tom Nastos, and I'm the group president and chief commercial officer for Informa Fashion. Most of you would probably know us as the company that produces the trade shows or events. So if you're familiar here in New York with either Coterie or Accessory Circuit, Intermezzo, or in Las Vegas with FN Platform, WWD Magic, or Project. These are our events. We produce events in the fashion industry with brands that bring together with retailers. Many of our events have been, actually Magic started I think in 1934, and Coterie over 32 years ago. And our goal is to bring people together. We're the organizer, and this is where brands go to market, and we provide a channel for them to bring their products to market.
Trudy.
Hi. I started out in media, working at magazines, and quickly made a jump over to the PR side and marketing side, and have worked with people like Sam Edelman, Neil Cole, who founded Iconics, worked with Joseph Abood, with a company called Caribbean Joe, always doing marketing and branding. And now I work with Andy Jassin, and we put together companies that are looking to expand their brands through licensing products, through mergers and acquisition, through financing, and we really help them increase their revenue.
I'm Josh Kapelman. One of the principals of Hildun, we finance a lot of luxury brands. Typically we start with companies in their first and second season or second season and really help them grow substantially. Over the years we've done everyone from Marc Jacobs and Tommy Hilfiger when he first got his start in business to ALC, who's been our client since day one, and Probel and Jason Wu and many others. I never in a million years I thought I'd wind up in the fashion industry. I'm a reformed tech entrepreneur who was working in venture capital in Boston and joined my family's firm and have been in love with it for the last 8 years.
Hi, I'm Andy Jassin. I operate with my colleagues a consulting group that helps companies in the fashion industries, in home furnishings, apparel, footwear, and jewelry, understand the business they're in, understand design, product, distribution, financing, and help them take their brand and get it in front of consumers. I've had the luxury of being able to be a part of Ralph Lauren's business, Calvin Klein's business, Armani's business. My career began after graduate school working in systems in an apparel company, and later on I learned that my passion was working in apparel. And the first 20 some odd years of my life, I worked in merchandising and sales and marketing, and eventually was lucky enough to head up some of those companies. Everything we're going to talk about today is about you. You're developing a brand, and you're going to go out into the world and be able to convince some people to either hire you or buy your products or listen to your point of view and develop a connection to other people like yourselves called consumers. And the three important things before I give up the microphone, obviously I like to talk a lot, is that everything is about a great product, meaning product could be a person, or it could be an inanimate object, or it could be a concept. It's also about a great story. Stories are about what does the product do? How does it get to you? What does it make it better for you? How does it help your life or help you do what you want? But you also need something that's most important, and that's a storyteller. And all of you are probably going to be better storytellers than all of us combined because of the technology you're dealing with. So let me give you back to my friend Michael.
Andy, thank you. So I work for a company called Rosenthal Rosenthal, and we provide financing and factoring services for companies. And we've been around for about, we're approaching our 80th year in business. And our clients could range from a Steve Madden to a Donald Pliner and footwear and a lot of electronics and some fashion and jewelry and all the things that we all know and love. So let's talk about branding. And I'm in the finance sector, but you know, we also finance brands as well, and brands have a certain, even though it's an intangible asset, it's something that does have a lot of value. And I think recently Coca-Cola had their brand valued, and I think it was valued, the valuation came in like 50 billion. It's an enormous valuation because it's a brand that's been around for some 100 years, and it has you know, money attached to it, you know, whether it's drinks or apparel and all different type of various and assorted products. So what I wanted to do is ask Josh, who also is in the finance business, but is also very focused on the value of a brand and the lifestyle and the cycle of a brand. How do you value a brand, Josh?
That's the $100 million question. You know, at the infancy, brands really don't have very much value. When you're first starting out, you have your own brand value and brand identity. And in my mind, it's so important to figure out early who your customer is and start targeting that person and make sure everything you do is true to that person. As you then continue to grow the size of the company and the sales, as long as you've been true to yourself, you'll find opportunities to license yourself out and bring in outside revenue to the company. And those types of things are what give it actual value, because a lender or someone would be able to look at all of the different revenue that is coming into the brand and be able to lend against it. Or when you're looking at an acquisition, they'll look at what the value of the intellectual property is.
When you look at a brand, right, and you value a company and say, you know what, I finance this company, now finance this company. These brand, many cases you get them when they're emerging and they're just starting out, and they start to get velocity. But on the other end, they over time burn out a brand. I mean, as we know,
absolutely.
Right? When is the best time, or when the brand starts to burn out, as we say? What happens? Why does that happen?
So I think it's when you grow to a point where one of two things happens. The first of which is when you're chasing after your customer, trying to figure out what's popular in the market, and you stray from your own branded identity to go after a new type of customer. I think the second thing that happens is you grow to a certain size and you say, okay, I've capitalized on swim. There's nowhere bigger I can go in swim. Let me start selling sweaters to these people. Well, the truth is, your customer doesn't look at you as a sweater brand. They look at you as a swim brand. And you're going to spend a ton of money on development, a ton of money on marketing, and at the end of the day, you're not going to capture very much sales when it comes to selling sweaters to them. And I think that's what happens to a lot of brands. I look at Band of Outsiders as one that I watched very closely because we were financing Band of Outsiders. And everyone said, oh, the name's got a ton of value. And in the end, no one ended up buying the brand name, because it had yet to hit that size where anyone was willing to buy it. It was still a relatively early company, and one that had multiple different price points, had sizing issues, was not always able to ship on time, and because of that, no one said, okay, I know what the Band of Outsiders brand is, I'm willing to buy it for X.
Tom, before you got involved in the trade show industry, you had a business, and you licensed brands. Those brands were, for the most part, hip-hop brands. that were at the time very popular. What happened?
What happened? I stopped doing it. So, no, I think,
Who told you to do that?
you know, I was smart, right? So, no, I think that what you're referring to is at a point in time, really from 1999, say, to 2007. I had multiple brands. I was, in addition to what I'm doing now as an event producer and an organizer, I was actually a brand and licensed brand. We developed some in-house brands ourselves. One of the brands that you mentioned is I was partners with Jay-Z and with Rockaware during that time period, and with Damon. So the brand itself really spoke to a very specific audience, and it was a time and place. And the marketing vehicle at that particular time, and this is before this generation, was really MTV. We were able to utilize product placement, and that was our ability to go to market at that particular time. But it ran its course, from up to 2010, and really what it spoke to wasn't necessarily hip hop or the artist or anything like that. It was much more a reflection of the community that it was serving. The community had moved on. It was primarily in the young men's business, similar to what it could be in juniors business, and there's quite a few examples in the 80s, 90s, and 2000 on how the brands eventually either evolve and move on or lower their distribution to attain the sales. It's not always the case, but it was certainly the case, in our case anyway.
Jaqui is a curator of brands, and people come to her because, and her firm, who's fantastic, by the way, and we know because she straightened us out, which is a big undertaking. And but when you see a brand, and Ellen, for example, and then she wants to migrate into consumer products, how do you do that?
Well, Ellen is a great case study because, of course, everyone knows Ellen. She's the 4th largest social media personality in the world. She has over 100 million followers. So it wasn't a case with her of, getting her name out there. Her name was already out there. It was a case of credibility. So she wanted to create a lifestyle brand. And what at that time, what people didn't know about Ellen is that she is a decorating junkie. So she would buy houses, renovate them, flip them, sell them for a huge profit, and then go to the next one. So we started working with her a year before we launched Ed, and we spent that year trying to position her as this lifestyle guru. And we did a coffee table book, and one of the things we wanted to do is align her with a retailer, so that, of course, the reason to align yourself with the retailer is because it introduces you to a whole huge customer base. So, and we went to Nordstrom first, and they turned us down, and we were like, how can you turn Ellen down? Wow, how could that happen? And yet they did. And so we had to go back and regroup, and what we decided was we were going to go to the very top, as opposed to going to somewhere in the middle with Nordstrom, because we thought they had a bigger customer reach. We were going to go truly for positioning and not for customer acquisition. And we went to Bergdorf's, and we said, we'd like to launch this brand with you. We just want a pop-up shop online and in the store for a month. That's it. You don't have to buy the product. The price point was much lower than Bergdorf's would usually carry. And in return, Ellen's going to do her show in New York. We'd love to do a stunt in your windows that will be on national TV on her show, and do a dinner for her and her friends. And we did that, and it kicked off Fashion Week. I think it was 2 years ago, 2016. It was the party for Fashion Week. We had Beyonce and Kim Kardashian and Kanye and Pharrell, and so all her friends came. Only about 50 people. It was very intimate, but obviously those pictures went around the world, and it was a huge success at Bergdorf's. The product, it was a great way to launch the brand. It also coincided with an 8-page spread in Vogue where Ellen went shopping in the Paris flea market with Hamish Bowles. So all of this high-end lifestyle positioning for Ellen, plus the launch of the book, all worked to really get the word out there that she had this lifestyle brand. And it's been a great success ever since. So, and then, of course, Nordstrom's came back to us and said, we actually would like to do something with Ellen. So we launched her shoe collection with Nordstrom, and it was very, very successful. So,
Andy, you've seen so many brands over your career,
Because I have gray hair.
and you've seen brands that have huge success and hit the wall, and certain other brands that become invigorated. Burberry's as an example, Tommy Hilfiger as another one, and there's just to name a couple. What makes a brand today relevant?
Well, it's going to sound strange, but brands are owned by consumers. They're managed by the brand owner. So the first thing is to have a point of view of what it's about. And that point of view has to be reinvented daily or weekly. And what's happened in some cases, because of tools like social media, brands can speak to consumers both on an individual basis or on a group basis, but also to be able to talk to the retailers. And I'm sure all of you are aware that online retailing is, in many cases, replacing some of the old type of brick and mortar retailing. And for brands to become relevant, it's not just about brands like Tommy Hilfiger or Burberry, it's brands of any kind. Gucci's considered one of the most relevant brands, and yet most of us would look at their windows and figure out nothing is saleable. Part of it's a story. Brands mean a consumer connection, and eventually we'll get to the point about all of you being a brand, because you've got to make a connection to get a job. So what happens with a brand is they have a very, very primary responsibility, and I said it a little earlier, a great product. That product has to be either focused at the top end, the middle end, or the lower end initially, but you also have to have a story, and that's where social media works best. The ability for consumers to talk to each other using a variety of tools. And you have to have the storytellers. The storytellers are the branding agencies, such as Jaqui. The trade shows are storytellers. The magazines where Trudy developed her career, of being able to speak to lots of different consumers, but the magazines tend to be in doctors' offices. So today you have to have the ability to not only justify yourself as a brand, but to also figure out how to use all these tools simultaneously. And the key here is technology. And you all have been trained here at FIT in both design and in business, and have been exposed to more technology in the early stage of your development than most people in business have. So you have all these advantages as the brand.
The comment that I'd like to make, there's now a science that how do people react, or how does all these channels that, whether it's social media, trade show venues, what have you, connect to the consumer. There's a science that there's a limbic reaction when you think of a brand, Burberry, what have you, Chanel, whomever, and how that resonates to a human being, and how they feel connected to a brand and motivates them to make that purchase. Does anybody, there's a whole science to this now.
I think that brands today are different than the brands that we grew up with. And I think that younger consumers, such as yourselves, want to find brands that reflect your own values. So cause-related issues are a big part of it. Brands that give back and that the things that are important to you, they're also discussing, whether it's water, clean water, or providing housing for people. It's not enough to just put a really pretty picture on a page anymore and say, now we have a brand. So it has to have, again, the right product, but then you're much more open to discovering smaller niche brands that you can kind of call your own, and that you feel understand you and are giving you value and product that is right for you?
Product today is ubiquitous. You know, you can get it anywhere, you can get it at any price, it's everywhere. So the importance of a brand isn't really about product anymore. It's you know, to Trudy's point, it's about your relationship with the brand. What about that brand makes you feel it, have a relationship with it, whether it's cause related, whether it's you know, the way it feels and looks and how it's distributed, whatever it is, whatever that touch point or those touch points are, the influencers that wear it that you relate to. So that's what's important. You know, when I grew up in the industry, it was all about the product. The merchant was the king. They brought the product to you. They found the great product, and that's what drove you to buy. That's not what drives you to buy anymore, right? It's a whole different playing field, and that's what everybody's adjusting to now, and that's why there's such disruption in retail.
If I may, I think there's also kind of an interesting connection here in terms of the authenticity of it. So when you're talking about Ellen, you mentioned her best friends, and I think that's really key. It wasn't just a bunch of famous people; it was quite literally her close friends. And when you're talking, right, and when you're talking about, you know, clean water or whatever, that has to be real, a real connection. It can't just be, oh, we support water because I think that's what the people want. I think that there's a transparency that's coming because of technology, that it's easy to find answers. You just go online on Google and you can find out. And brands are being asked, I think, or they have to be authentic with their consumer base. And that also, I think, has to do with where they retail. It has to be an authentic connection in their retail space. You know, Josh spoke in my graduate level class, and we talked a lot about how retail has to be an authentic experience.
I agree, and I also, at this point, maybe we could, if your students have a question or like a comment, you could feel free to respond. The dynamics of these brands that we're seeing as well, that are they environmentally friendly? You know, the fast fashion people are, you know, really can't make that claim. Is there authenticity to the designer? Does he or she resonate, you know, with their consumers? And as individuals, how important is it for us to create a brand, our own brand, and being able to amplify that, whether it's in your career, whether it's you know, going on a job search, and how do you express yourself, you know, to a potential employer, or as you're as you're working, what does that mean to your, you know, career path?
Well, I think there has to be, just going back to this authenticity, it's hard, right, on social media to create a profile that feels both authentic to who you are, and many of you are just students just getting started, so you're not famous yet, you don't have big brand names, but also using that as a way to augment or sort of be strategic in the kind of brand you want to put out there. And I think that's pretty key to what Andy's talking about.
How many of you have been on interviews recently? And how many of you have jobs in the next year? How many of you will be looking for jobs? One of the things that's important is how to get a job, I guess, you know, and how to prepare yourself. And we're here because we really support FIT and have enjoyed a relationship with you all, the students and the faculty and the administration. But what's really important is you've had a great education of blending technology and blending design and blending business. How many of you have taken business courses? The marriage of business and the marriage of design is really important, you know, and almost every well-known important designer that you'll have heard of or have met will have had somebody next to them who is partnered with them to help them with business, but also have made them aware of what business things to look forward to. But part of what we're here to talk about is to help you understand how to get a job. You know, Michael, maybe you want to address that, of what it is to go out on an interview and what people look for.
Well, I think the most important thing is that the the cadence of how it happens so fast, because typically people will make a decision whether or not to hire you. You know, the ultimate decision is once you get through the HR process, very rapidly. So I always suggest to people that are going on interviews that you need to come on, you know, rather quickly, because that decision is going to be made probably in the first 30 seconds of the interview. You've already gotten, you know, they've seen your resume, you've gotten past HR, and you know, just to express yourself in a short period of time, and then put your best foot forward, frankly.
Can I chime in here?
Yes, certainly.
Because we're hiring people all the time, and this is the one situation I would say that it's not all about you, because you have to come in prepared, and that's really for everything you do in life. But you have to do your homework. You have to understand what the company is. You have to ask questions about the company so they know that you understand what the company is, and then you have to tell a story about how you will fit in and why you're the right candidate for that job. And I can't tell you how many people don't come prepared, that they come in ready to talk about themselves, which is great, but they don't talk about how they'll fit into the company and why the company intrigues them and why they want to work for that company and what the company is about that they know and what questions they have. It's really an easy thing to do, and I think it's the most important.
And just to expand on that, it even goes as far as really trying to do some research and understand what that company's culture is like. You know, they used to say at Condé Nast, when you got on the elevator, you could tell which floor everyone was getting off by the way they spoke, by what they wore, by just their being. They represented that magazine. So if you're going to work at a company, you kind of understand what their culture is, how you can present yourself in a way that you would fit in that culture if you want to fit in that culture. But it's you know, doing a lot of research, talking to people, understanding what people who have succeeded there have done that's made it work, and that's for any position.
And one other thing, you have a tool now that I certainly didn't have growing up in this business, and it's called LinkedIn, and it's amazing. And you can do so much with LinkedIn and really have a voice, really talk about who you are. And it's an amazing resume presenter for you. And everyone in HR in every company is on LinkedIn, and there's special products that you can buy from LinkedIn that you're actually looking at your profile based on who you are and what you're interested in. So really focus on that. Whether you're into Instagram or Snapchat or Facebook or whatever, LinkedIn for your career is the most important thing you'll do. And I can't say that enough.
So two notes on that. First, always expect that when you're being interviewed, the first thing that's going to happen afterwards is the interviewer is then going to go and look you up on Facebook, Instagram, etc., and see what you're really like. And it's so important that you make sure that every one of your social media outlets reflects the person that you are. The second thing, which is related to what you were saying about LinkedIn, is Chris Matthews, who I love, wrote a book, and one of the things that he says in it is, once someone helps you once, they become an investor in your own personal brand. So anytime you need help, anything else, you can always reach out to that person because their success becomes your success. So go through LinkedIn and look at, hey, I want to find a job at that company. Oh, I noticed that this person is the CEO or the CFO or the CFO, and they're connected with this professor or one of these people that's sitting on this panel. And message one of us and say, hey, we saw you're connected with X. We're looking for a job there. Now, obviously, I'm not going to say, yeah, let me introduce you. I'm going to say, why don't you come up to my office, let me meet you for 30 minutes and make sure that it makes sense. But that's how it works. And I would absolutely recommend that you look at LinkedIn not only for that company, but to see if you know anyone that's connected to that company.
I think part of doing research about the companies also helps you to know if you would be a good fit, because I do think sometimes we go there to a job and we feel uncomfortable, but we're so focused on getting the job that we're not actually listening to ourselves, or even maybe we even did this beforehand going, oh my God, I don't want to look like a Ralph Lauren person. Well, maybe you shouldn't be working at Ralph Lauren then. because not only will you feel that, but the person on the other end is going to feel it. And probably if for some crazy reason you get the job, it's probably not going to work out because of that connection, that authentic connection's not there. But I do think that a lot of that can be figured out before you even walk in the door, just by having conversations through LinkedIn, through your friends, your network, and doing research.
How many of you have ever written a resume? Well, believe it or not, at the early stage of your lives, that resume is really not as important as really putting together a great cover letter or putting together some communication to somebody you would like to address via LinkedIn or through snail mail. But it's very important to do that research. And you have a huge advantage over students 20 years ago because of communication skills. Things that you're able to do weren't even invented. And everything that we do, and everyone here in their professional lives, has one thing that makes them different than somebody else, is their success is about communication. Of who to communicate with, who not to communicate with, but also to know what to communicate with. And it's so vital as you begin your careers to think about everything you've heard here about focusing on what the company does. You know, who do you want to talk to in that company? And to also realize that your first jobs will never be your last jobs. So even the first mistakes you make, most of them are not fatal. So everything you do is about collecting information of how to do a better job for your next job, but you have to get your first job. And again, these are tools that you have to use.
Tom, how important, if you want to work hypothetically for Ralph Lauren, and you want to be a designer for Ralph Lauren, but there's really no designer jobs open, there's an opportunity in, call it logistics. Isn't it just important just to get in and then see if you can, migrate to another department?
That was my tactic when I first started out in the career, just to get in. My original tactic was to identify the company that had significant growth, and then let me see if I could get in the door, and then I would maneuver within that. So it was successful. But listening to everybody, I think, and I literally had this conversation with our board a couple of weeks ago. Our organization, so we're a company of 11,000 people now. And our organization, our biggest challenge is we're looking for the best and the brightest. And they asked me, specifically, well, what does that mean and how are you going to do that? And I'm actually thinking that the script is going to flip. And it's going to flip now, and it's going to flip in New York. Everybody has heard about Amazon coming to Long Island City. Google is expanding here. They're all in the fashion business also. So at the end, I was actually fearful, and am, that I want the best and the brightest, but I will be in competition with Amazon, with Google, with Goldman Sachs, okay, with all of these other organizations that are here in New York City, and I have to compete with that. So how do I do that, and what is it that I have to basically offer? So in your particular case, I think what you have to do is position yourself in a manner that would make somebody like us react to that. Because now the viewpoint coming from me is I need the best and the brightest. So in your particular skill set, okay, how you communicate it, whether through a letter, okay, or any other method of communication, whether it's social media, that I'm the best at this particular, you have an upside with me, okay, and that would make, I think, an organization like us react. What that also means, though, is broadening your search, right? That I think the traditional, before in the past, that I would look at a Ralph Lauren or a particular brand, I don't think that's applicable anymore. I think what's applicable is a much broader, because now fashion is going across all of these, from technology, okay, through through different channels of distribution, how you're going to get it through, whether traditional retailers, brick and mortar, or right, and or other ways of either marketing, right? The traditional marketing is no longer there. And what made me think of that was what you were discussing before, is that the traditional marketing in the past, again, that I grew up with, is we the brands and the marketers were telling people what to buy. Today, consumers are telling us what they want, and we have to be really quick on how to react to that. And then hopefully if you have a good mission, you could you could connect those 2 points. I think the same thing applies when this group is looking for a position, okay, that in many ways you have to position yourself that you're going to say, yes, I want you, okay? And I think that's where we're going.
I think there isn't a huge advantage to graduating seniors to come into this job market, because it's evolving, as you mentioned, very rapidly. And I think that the challenge is, frankly, not so much for the workforce, is for the employers. How do we attract and keep these people?
Just one other thing. I think right now, because of the shifts in technology and consumer behavior, I've been in, actually with my sons, in different meetings with them, and because they were 30 and under, they were getting hired by organizations, say, yes, you're in. Okay, we're going to shift our business to your company, because they understood, the new approach to the marketplace, as opposed to somebody like myself who's always playing catch up. Okay, it's a little bit different. So I think also chief executives, HR departments are looking at it from a very different perspective, because the landscape has changed so much that this is the group that's going to resonate going forward. So I think there's a transition that's actually happening.
Do you think there's some value, because I hear this from students a lot, is like, what is the expertise that I bring, especially as a graduate? And to some degree, it's what you graduate in. If you're a designer, then you're bringing some expertise as a designer, at least the talent there. But I think there's so much more, which you just touched on. It could be that you've used Instagram your whole life and you're very good at it, that you see things more strategically, or that you have a really good way of communicating one-on-one with people, which is a talent that we don't see as often anymore. And I'm just curious from you all if how you think that they could go about sort of putting a list together of things that you think potential companies would be looking for beyond just, hey, I'm a designer. Internships.
They're so important. That's when we hire entry-level people, which is all the time. That's the first thing we look at, and references. I mean, the internships give you such amazing experience, and that's something you definitely have to offer when you come to a job, because school experience is one thing, and it's fantastic, but real life experience really just adds more to your resume. And then those internships, if you had a great experience, and if the person who employed you had a great experience with you, they're a great reference for you. And to me, it's very old-fashioned. Those are the two things. And we actually get our interns from LinkedIn. So again, that's a great resource for you to start getting internships, because they have a whole section there that they can hire.
But Josh, isn't an internship like just a summertime sort of dating? And,
I was actually going to say, with an internship, you also have to be very careful, because we know a lot of people who an internship turns into a very long-term internship, and ends up not being as much an internship as much as it is a low-paid individual. And it's really important to set the terms of the internship, the duration of that internship. We use interns every single summer. We use interns as much as we can get them. I love interns. I love having them. I am happy to open up my Rolodex and our Rolodex and saying, here are jobs you can get. To be perfectly honest, we're not hiring someone in that internship position on an annual basis. So you have to look at, if you're taking an internship, is this going to help me get a job? And if so, how? And Josh, one of the things I'd respond to what you're saying, it also depends on the company you're going into. You all have the ability, and this is going to sound horrible, but you all have the ability to be the voice of your generation. You can go into older companies that don't necessarily understand how your demographic is shopping and how the world is changing, and say, listen, I'm telling you, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to pivot. Now, you have to really know your stuff. But there are people that are willing to listen to that.
And it may sound odd, but if there's an older company, I'm not sure what qualifies as an older company, an old school company, you are the future. You're the ability to talk to groups of people that look like you, sound like you, in different parts of the world. And if you can bring those connections by being able to convince the people you want to go to work for that you're the master of communications, then you have a slight better in than somebody else that doesn't have them.
So I think it's also important through classes, through talking to your friends, through internships, to really figure out what your own strengths and weaknesses are. and then to be able to really highlight your strengths, both at interviews, on LinkedIn, on your social media, as part of your brand. You know, if you are a fantastic communicator, know that and let the world know. If you're really bad at something, find a way to not make that a focus. That's going to be really important in this process.
Yeah, we find an internship program is not only in my firm, but in so many others, that it's a trial, that you're getting to know the employer, and you may say at the end of the year, these people are horrible, they're tyrants, I would never want to work there. Or, I'm working hard, I love them, I want to be, I could see my future here. And it's a way for both sides to get to know each other. So I think they're great, frankly.
Experience, though. I mean, even because we have interns 4 times a year. We have 8 interns 4 times a year at our company, and they are for a set period of time. And the experience that they're getting, that we make sure that they get, is great. We're not going to obviously hire them because that's a lot of people to hire, but we feel like they leave with great experience that they can go on to the next thing. And that, just learn as much as you can. And if you feel like you're not being challenged in your internship, or you're not doing things that are stretching you, or you're learning from, talk to your supervisor and say you want more, because they'll always give you more if you feel you can do it. And as Trudy said, if you have a real talent, if you're great on social media, say, oh, let me do this for you, or find an opportunity where you can really participate. And we do hire our interns, actually. We don't hire all of them, but the ones that are really fantastic and stand out usually do get a job at the end of it.
And then network. If you have internships, you're meeting people, you're doing something, you're meeting people in the company, you're meeting people that you're talking to outside the company. So keep those communications, follow up with them, reach out, be persistent. After you graduate, contact them again and say, I really enjoyed working with you, just wanted to see if you know of any opportunities. Just network.
Do we see a show of people that actually have found jobs? Is anybody?
Did anyone raise a hand have a job?
What? You waiting to hear? What? Why? Why? I gather you're all actively interviewing, or starting to interview.
There's usually more in the spring.
Yeah.
Well, it's already December, so it's.
How many of you have internships set up for the spring or coming up?
Okay.
Okay.
And these are internships that you were able to get through the resource department or on your own? How? I'm just curious. How did you, this young lady to the left?
I talked to a professor who recommended a company, and then I job shadowed, and then I asked for an internship.
Okay, that's great.
Terrific.
Good. Which company?
Andy and Evan.
Okay. Okay, good. Anybody else get an internship? And?
I spoke to them at the group here, and Smith Aviana, they just contacted me at the group here, so I've been interviewing with them.
Great.
Congratulations. Wow, great. Okay. Anybody else have a question or a comment or for our esteemed panel here?
Before, I just want to jump in one more time with one more question, because I do think, because you're all hiring and you talk to young people a lot in terms of, because there's a lot that's happening in the marketplace right now. We were joking, what marketplace? But there's so many changes. But I'm curious, what are some of the things, 1, 2, 3 things that you would love to hear from a potential hire that makes you feel like they understand the marketplace or understand how to communicate their ideas or their design aesthetic or their marketing perspective?
I just want to mention, when we hire, that the individual has spent some time in, what do we have a website, which is fine, but you have to really, there's so many, we live in a transparent world, so there's so much information out there, good and bad, whatever, and that they understand, somewhat we're about, and that they come across very, effusive in the interview, right? Here's what I can do, and we don't expect, an early hire to know it all, because you learn on the job. You figure it out as you go along. And I think that's what really we focus in on. And of course, I don't know who mentioned that your resume matches up with all the other information.
I'd like to know that you've done research on my company and can tell me something about the competition or the space that my business is in, so that when we do speak, or if you were speaking to one of our clients, that I feel that you've done your homework, that you've done your research, that we can engage in a conversation. Not only am I interviewing you, but you're interviewing me as well, and are able to be open enough in a conversation that we can exchange ideas. It's not just about how was school, where'd you go, where'd you eat. That's not enough. It's about being able to be glib enough to ask the right questions and know enough information about why you're sitting in front of me. And another thing to think about is fashion is expanded. It's not about apparel and footwear and home furnishings and fragrance and jewelry. It includes real estate and architecture. It includes every precept of what goes in front of you. So the skill sets you develop may not be exactly fitting into the apparel zone or fragrance zone or jewelry zone. Expand your world. Because of your education here, you've been presented lots of different things to think about and see. Maybe you should reach out to somebody beyond the normal apparel zone.
So,
One last thing about interns and your voice. We value our interns so much, and we value what you have to say so much, and the information you carry with you, just living your life, that at the end of each of our programs, our 4 programs, we ask the interns to do a presentation to us. And we ask them questions like, how do you consume media? What's your favorite social media channel? Where do you shop? Who are the influencers you follow? Where do you get your fashion trend information? And then we ask you to select a client and do an activation around them. And we take the time and sit there, and it's over a 2-day period, and every intern has their 20 minutes to present this information to us in whatever way they'd like, so they can be creative about it. But the information that we get from you is so valuable, and I don't know if you understand how valuable you are, and I think we talked a little bit about it in the panel, but just to bring the point home, you have a lot to offer, just in who you are and who your social circle is, and the information you can bring to a prospective employer.
Josh.
So to Andy and Mike's point, we hired someone a couple of weeks ago, and they didn't have all of the skill set that we were looking for the position. But he's a young guy, and we were asking questions. He said, you know what, I'm smart, I'm gonna work hard. If I don't know something, I'll research it, I'll learn it, and I promise I'll figure it out. And that was all I had to hear. In my mind, I looked across to my business partner, I said, we're good. Because it's really the attitude. This is someone who is A, gonna be with us for a long period of time, and B, who's really gonna just has that right attitude that fits in this corporate culture, instead of where everyone right now says, oh, well, that's not my job. This is someone who's saying, you know what, don't worry about it, I'll figure it out, I'll learn it. I loved it.
If you didn't write that down, write that sentence down.
All right, let's open to questions, shall we?
Okay. Hello.
Lots of practice this semester, so who wants to go first? All right, I'll give you a mic. How's that?
Hi. So, apart from internships, are there any other things you'd suggest in terms of gaining experience? Because I know FIT is great with assisting with finding internships and opportunities like that, but we're on an exchange, so we go home next week, and I feel like it's a lot harder at our university to find internships, especially because a lot of them are based in London and unpaid, which as a student, especially when you live nowhere near London, it's just not feasible to support yourself for 3 months whilst you take part in an internship. So are there any other ways that you suggest are good to kind of find experience and kind of figure out what you want to do?
I'd say informational interviews are so incredibly valuable. Just start emailing everyone you can find. And I was moderating a panel discussion a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to Rachel Blumenthal, who founded Rockets of Awesome. And Rachel was at the time working in marketing, or wanted to get into marketing, wanted to get into the fashion industry, and she was invited to this event. And that person accidentally, instead of BCCing everyone, CC'd 50 people from Yves Saint Laurent and everyone else. And Rachel went in and emailed every single one of those people individually her resume, said, "Hi, I saw you were on this email. I'm looking to get into the fashion industry. Could I please have a call with you?" She got a job at Yves Saint Laurent from that email. So that's what I'd say. And it's specifically in London, Judith Tully, who I don't know if you know, runs the Center for Fashion Enterprise and is absolutely lovely in helping younger people and younger designers.
One of the other things which I find is really worthwhile, there's a lot of startups, and these startups, a lot of them will burn out, but I think it's a valuable experience. Why? Because you're going to be exposed to all sort of departments, whether it's marketing or finance or design, what have you, and they desperately need, people, interns, what have you, and if you could find, somehow a channel to meet some of these startups, they're all over. You probably see a lot of them. And they're fantastic.
Tom had told everyone about the shows that his company runs. Have any of you attended those shows? If you're going to live in the zone, you got to play in the zone. And his company controls the zone. And where people bring product to market in the normal course of business are trade shows. And here in New York, you've got some of the great trade shows. So,
and correct me if I'm wrong, but students can go to the trade shows.
Yeah, if they contact you, I would arrange for them to get in. So it's business to business. But to give you some idea, some scale, we have over 13,000 fashion brands that are part of the portfolio. Some of our events, we have between 50 to 70,000 fashion professionals that show up at the event. So it is kind of the super highway to get to meet and greet and say hello to people and at least get yourself in front. And also it's educational to understand what's happening in the marketplace. So even if you're going on interviews, discussions, you see what's happening in fashion, what's happening as far as the commercial side of the business. So.
And in the downtime during a trade show, you can walk over and introduce yourself to somebody, and you never know what happens.
And by the way, it's about a 5-minute walk to the west side, to the Javits Center, so it's not exactly far.
Other questions? I'm standing really close to you now, so I can.
And Tom, you have fantastic speakers.
Yeah, we have everything from educational component to the business. So it's not just B2B trade. So there are speakers at the events. So there's all different. There's a whole slew of events that are actually going on during the market.
And it's truly a marketplace. So you could see what's selling, what's not selling. When I go over, I find it very informational. I mean, and we meet all our beloved clients. They're literally, hopefully selling stuff.
What kind of events can they go to other than trade shows to network and meet people?
There are a lot of great panel discussions going on in New York. There are just so many different events where you can have opportunities to meet people.
Sure. How you said about gaining experience in startups is, a good way to start out, but how? Because that's advice I feel like I've been given a lot, especially, living outside the city where the opportunities are, and it's not always feasible to go to those big companies that offer the internships. But as big companies yourself, do you actually value the experience gained from those startups? Because sometimes I get the impression that if it's a name you don't know, it's brushed off. Kind of thing, like they don't.
I think the experience, in my mind, for a startup is invaluable because you're going to see how the whole engine works, right? And they're very excited. They're probably very stressful. They have no money, but don't worry, Josh will give them the money. But I think the experience with a startup, because you're going to be exposed to all the different, platforms of a company. How does it work? How do we get there? How do we build something? The money, and keep that thing going. And I think and some of them, who knew? You could be with a startup that, okay, we're going to hire you, we'll give you little stock options, and you could be rich, maybe.
I think,
who knew?
as Mike's saying, if you're hired by a big corporation, your job is going to be so defined. You are not going to be able to do other things. You're going to be doing, your job. If it's a startup, you might be helping out with sales one day, working in design. They might send you to a factory for sourcing. They might, have you help on marketing. You're going to get experience across the board, whether you want it or not, sometimes in a startup. But that's experience that you can take with you, and on these other interviews, you can say, oh, by the way, yeah, I worked on that, and I did this at this other company that I worked for or interned with. So I think it's a tremendous experience and really valuable.
Yeah, it's totally about how you frame it. If you said, well, I worked at a startup, and they said, oh, I've never heard of it, you said, that doesn't really matter. I wouldn't say it like that, but that doesn't really matter because I worked in sales. I spent some time in production. I can understand a P&L and a balance sheet. To Andy's earlier point, creatives are so in need of people who can understand the business side of the brand. And if you say, well, I worked in everything and I really understand it, well, I'm going to hire you.
Right, because you're going to be versatile. I mean, you could be shipping product. Who knows? And I think that experience is the best. Now, how do you get to these startups? I'm sure there's a clever way to research and find them. No?
Well, there's also, there's big events that are in the fashion industry that always need volunteers, so whether it's Fashion Week or Fashion Group, Night of Stars, or Rising Star, there's all these very important events that go on, and even if you just volunteer for the day, just to get yourself out there, to understand how an event works, to understand the people that are going to the event, contact the CFDA, contact the Fashion Group, contact the Accessory Council. They all have big, important events, and I think that's a great way, especially if you have limited time. You can volunteer for the evening, you can volunteer for the afternoon, whatever, and it doesn't take a large chunk of your time, and you'll meet a lot of great people.
Yeah.
I think we have time for at least one last question. Okay.
I want to know more about what do you think is the most advantage technology in the fashion industry for now? Because personally, I'm curious about, I want to work with something that is not popular right now, but maybe change the future of the fashion. So do you have any experience?
Probably all have a different point of view about that. I know for what I do, it's social media. Most brands, not all, but most brands don't understand it. They don't use it properly. They don't know how to use it. And they think that just because you're young, you know how to use it. And that's not always the case. So I would say for marketing or brand work, that would be the most important platform.
We agree. Trudy and I just left a meeting with one of the probably most important female athletes in the world who's going to do a deal with a jewelry company. And what separates that from becoming a no deal is the connectivity on social media of that brand, of the hundreds of millions of people that have followed this person's career. And it's not about playing a sport, it's about communicating values. And that is going to make a deal happen for a manufacturer because the connectivity of the license to consumers. So mastering social media becomes very important tools for selling, for design, for business development, and for financing those companies, because we all want to know how you reach out and touch.
I think technology, whatever industry you're in, is changing our lives immensely. And, in our own little industry, we're looking for new and quicker ways to analyze financial transactions, right? And I could fire myself, I can get an algorithm to do my job. But it's happening very fast, and all that information is helping us. And that's a whole nother spectrum of this industry, how it's working and changing our lives.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it's totally not sexy, but understanding inventory management and life cycle of product for direct-to-consumer companies. There are ERP systems and there are many pieces of software around all of this for wholesale, but we're still at the beginning of the direct-to-consumer conversation.
And with technology, whether it's social media or any kind of a program, it's staying relevant, staying up to date, because throughout the process of your career, just as ours, it's going to be changing constantly. And if you learn something now and think that you're going to be, ahead of the game if you keep using this in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I've worked with people who were in accounting who didn't know how to use Excel, because when they started years ago, it was all done in a book. Mm-hmm. So you have to always stay on top of what's coming out, what's new, and that goes for social media also. If you are using the same thing in 5 years, probably not up to date.
I just got trained in CLO. Do you guys all know CLO, the 3D design? And I'm not even a designer, but it occurred to me the business ramifications of no sampling, easier supply chains. And I was going to say, I think not only is it learning how to use some of these technologies, but understanding the business ramifications of these, so that you can go to an employer and say, not only can I design in CLO, but this is how it might save you money, or this is how we might go to market quicker.
I would throw, for technology, because I think your question was forward looking, 3 things that may seem a little bit out there, but not really. One would be artificial intelligence for the fashion industry. Number 2 would be voice marketing, which I think is going to dramatically change what we're basically doing. And then I've been to quite a few presentations in regard to the blockchain, specifically for the fashion industry. I think those 3 things within the next 36 months are going to transform everything quickly.
100%, absolutely
Particularly,
right
yeah.
on. Yeah.
Real fast.
Yep.
So we need to finish up, but I thought maybe each of us could give a word of advice. This is the last class, last lecture. They've had a really interesting assortment of guests this year, but I think each of you probably have some sort of perspective or advice that you could give them as they finish up this semester.
Sit behind somebody smart. Make certain that you listen to the world you live in, what people want to buy, where they want to buy it, and how do they want to buy it. I mean, the technology you heard about great product, but pay attention to all your surroundings, because that's your job in the future, to be able to connect all the dots.
Use us, use your people and professors to build a network that will help you grow in your careers.
Make sure that when you do land in that job, that it's something that you love doing and that makes you happy. And if you find that you're not happy to go to work every day, don't ever be afraid to change careers and change your job. Whether you've been there a year, 5 years, 20 years, it's never too late. And find something that really makes you happy and you love doing.
I was going to say, think of yourselves as an asset, right? All your skills that, through the educational process, and then think of somebody like us here as an investor, right? So if you think of me as somebody, will I invest in you? Because it's not just hiring you, right? It's about investing in your future. So when I look at it through the lens, when a lot of my team members are hiring people, is do I see that person, and is that an investment that we're prepared to make? You have to make the case that you're a great asset, okay, and coming through this institution you are. So if you're a great asset, okay, the other person will say, yes, I will invest in you.
I believe this industry is built on relationships. It's how it moves, it's how it ticks. So to Josh's point, every single person you meet is someone that you can put in your Rolodex or your whatever it is now, the technical version of that. And keep those relationships. Don't let them fall away. Make sure you follow up. They're a gift, really. And the more you can get yourself out there and meet people, and the more you can cultivate these relationships, the more successful you're going to be in your career in the fashion industry.
I think your career is enhanced by the fact that you're going to an esteemed institution, and I would try to consider yourself as a brand, and how do you amplify that brand to an employer and then throughout your career.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have the Fashion Service Network here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And happy holidays.